Hello, everyone. I am Alan Stein Jr., keynote speaker, former basketball performance coach, and the author of the new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best. On today's episode, Dav and I dive into the importance of mastering the basics and why everyone needs to live present in order to maximize their impact. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, do you need to up-level your leadership? On this episode, you're going to discover how to raise your game and become the best of the best. How? Well, you'll have to stay tuned. Remember, you can now chat about this episode or any past episodes in our Facebook group. Just simply search for Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. And as always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever it is that you tune into podcasts. We also need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and please subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday. We are all the way from Colorado to Wisconsin. If you're a regular listener, a big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 listeners globally. You can also catch us on Roku TV, where we have over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every show, we're honored to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to listen to make you a better leader. You can also catch us on Google Home and Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down, dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, C-suite leader, sales leader, entrepreneur leader, or a leader in any capacity, you know the game of business has changed. And that saying, this is how we do it around here, is the death rattle of a soon-to-be-dead company. But how can we practically raise our game and cultivate a culture that births champions? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. My guest on this episode is Alan Stein Jr. Alan Stein Jr. is a coach, speaker, and author with an expertise in improving organizational performance, cohesion, and accountability. He spent 15 plus years working with the highest performing basketball players on the planet, including NBA star Kevin Durant. He now travels the world teaching organizations how to utilize that same strategy in business that elite athletes use to perform at a world-class level. Today, he's the author of the best-selling business book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best. Please help me welcome performance coach, speaker, author, Alan Stein Jr.
My man. I think I need a little more energy. Yeah, you do. I just need a little bit more energy. I was expecting you to turn it up. No.
Sorry about that.
This is awesome. And I'll say before we even get cracking here, how cool this is for me, because I've been a longtime fan and admirer of yours from social, and have been a longtime listener of your show. And to finally be here. I know we're not in the same room at present, but to finally be connecting with you is a real honor, and I'm excited for this conversation.
That's very cool, mate. Thank you. I'm honored. I'm really grateful to be here. And let me just say, congratulations on the endorsement for the book from Dan Pink, no less.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think we met him at a conference, and I've been a longtime reader of his work. So, for him to show some support was really cool.
Well, I think, there's a lot of leadership experts out there, and there's certain people who are in that upper echelon of, where other leaders look at them and go, wow, And so when you get, the nod from someone like Dan Pink, who is very well established and, and definitely knows what he's talking about. When he gives you the nod, that's a pretty nice nod. So full congratulations. He didn't endorse my book. There again, I didn't ask him, but that's not the point. He should have psychically known to endorse my book.
I love it, man. No, that's so cool. You know, and it's funny. Folks ask me all the time why I even wrote a book. And while I had several reasons, one of the main reasons was, you know, I've been devouring books myself for the last 20 years, and there have been so many of them that have had a profound impact on my life, you know, to the point where I read the book and I saw the world, or I saw myself differently after I read it. And certainly Dan's, you know, one of those type of authors. So one of the reasons I wrote a book was, you know, if I have something that I've accumulated over my life's journey that can add value to someone else and can help them in any way, maybe up level their perspective, you know, I feel like that's our duty as leaders and as influencers to do that. So, you know, the fact that Dan has had such a profound impact on my life through his work, I'm hoping that, you know, maybe there's a chance I can offer a sliver of that to someone else.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I've said for years that I believe that leadership is about impact. You know, it's the impact that we have. But, you know, I tell a story about this, but which I won't go into here right now. But one of the things about impact is it's not always direct. So when Dan Pink wrote his book, he doesn't know Alan Stein Jr. is going to read that book.
Exactly.
And he doesn't know that not only is Alan Stein Jr. going to read that book, and be impacted by it, but Alan Stein Jr. is going to go out into the world and have impact using something that Dan Pink taught him, and that impact is on a leader who is going to impact somebody else in their team. And there's this lovely, wonderful ripple effect. And I think that that's what we as leaders have to have a responsibility to. It's not just the person who's in front of you. It's the echo of your message for 5 generations. And I think that that's a powerful thing for us to take responsibility for.
Absolutely. And well said. And I certainly hope you take that to heart, because I know you have that impact on a lot of people, myself very much included. So whether you realize Alan Stein Jr. has been watching and or listening to you, he has been, and very thankful for everything that you put out.
That's very kind. Thank you, sir. Now, you spent 15 plus years working with these high level basketball players. It seems, you know, we're not on the inside, you are, or you've been. It seems like there's a lot of ego at those highest possible levels. Talk to us about balancing that ego with raising good leaders, because leadership requires us to subjugate the ego, to push it off to the side. And it seems like that's a world that would be massive in the ego sense. So talk to us about that connection.
For sure. Before I dive into that, just for context for your listeners, what makes my career unique is that I've been able to see elite basketball players from 2 different vantage points. I was able to work at 2 internationally renowned high schools here in the DC area that have a combined 15 guys in the NBA right now, guys like Kevin Durant. And I got to meet them and work with them when they were only 14, 15 years old. So I got a chance to see them before they made it to the highest levels. But then I got some work with Nike and with Jordan Brand and with USA Basketball, and I got to observe firsthand the best players in the game, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant. So I got to see players after they had already made it big. So I've seen the before and the after picture. And as you just so insightfully put, an ego is a big part of it. And there is a very delicate balance, because elite level players and elite level leaders need to have an ego to the degree of incredibly confident in their ability, confident in the work that they've put in. They have to believe that they deserve an opportunity to be successful because of the work they've put in during the unseen hours. However, that ego and that ego alone, if it's not brushed with humility, is when we can have a problem. So I want players, or I want leaders, or I want executives that have very high confidence, but they've mirrored that with very high humility, so that they don't believe that they've arrived. They don't believe that they know it all. They definitely don't believe they're better than anyone else just because of where they fall on the org chart. That they believe in themselves, and they know they've deserved the right to be successful, but they know there's always more to learn. There's always new challenges to conquer. And they try to take their own personal ego and they dissolve it into what's called a team ego, an organizational ego, which is incredibly important, where you take pride in everyone that's on your team and you have their back literally and figuratively, so that the group can accomplish the group mission. And the best leaders I've been around have very high confidence, very high humility, and they've created a team ego.
So, and I think that that's a great point. Thanks for bringing it up, because I think that is often missed. There's I've talked about this before, that there's a misunderstanding of this word humble, and the analogy would be, is Alan Stein Jr. a great speaker? And if Alan said he's awesome, if I'm asking Alan responds with he's awesome, and then I say to you listening, is that a humble statement? You might say no. Well, the truth of the matter is, if you actually understand the word, the answer is yes, because humble comes from an Aramaic word, not an ancient Hebrew word, but an Aramaic word, which predates ancient Hebrew, and it means God first. And it means when I let it flow through me, I am spectacular. It being God or the divine or whatever you want to call it, Fred, Ethel, doesn't matter. But whatever it is, that I let that come through me, and I, the ego, move to the side. And so it's not egoic. In fact, it's disrespectful to say, when somebody says, you're spectacular, you go, well, yeah, I was okay. That's not humble. That's actually disrespectful. It's actually disrespecting that divine energy that flows through you. But that divine energy that comes through, the conduit is built by the person. And this is a really great point that I know you and I work a lot on with the people we work with, is the conduit is built by the person. So what I mean by that is that divine energy, whatever you want to call it, universal consciousness, is there for all of us. But you've got to dig in and build the roadway for it to flow through. And that's the work that it takes to do that. And then when it flows through, yeah, you look spectacular, but you had to do that. And one of the things that I see over and over today, because we are a very fast-moving, fast-learning society, one of the things I see a lot of is people who they want to jump past the basics. They want to be there now, right? Talk to us, because I know you have some very strong thoughts about this, especially when these kids look at the Kobe Bryants of the world or the superstars of the world, and they go, I want to be there now. A lot of kids want to be famous for being famous. Talk to us what you think about this, doing the work.
Yeah.
So I know you have a big piece.
Absolutely. And you teed that up perfectly. I mean, it's so important that we all recognize that the basics work, that they always have and they always will. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about leadership or if we're talking about footwork in basketball. The basics work. And the hard part is we live in a society that's increasingly telling us that it's okay to skip steps and trying to nudge us to circumvent the process. And, we're bombarded by this encouragement to chase what's hot and flashy and sexy and new and skip over what's basic. But the basics work. And again, they always have and they always will. And this is vital, especially when we're talking about business. And, I think one of the biggest pitfalls any leader can make is skipping over the basics. I tell a story all of the time. It's one of my signature stories about the first time I met Kobe Bryant. Was back in 2007. And I had a chance to work his Nike Skills Academy. And Nike brought in the top high school and college players from around the country for this 3-day mini camp with Kobe, who at the time in 2007, most would agree he was the best player in the world. I mean, Michael Jordan, who many thinks the best of all time, he'd already retired a couple times at that point. And LeBron James, yeah, he really did. And LeBron was just starting to find himself. Kobe was that dude. And, I've spent my entire life in a basketball bubble. So in the training circles, I'd heard the urban legend of how insanely intense Kobe's individual workouts were. And since I was on camp staff, I figured this was my chance. This was my shot.
Yeah.
So my earliest opportunity, I went right up to him and said, Kobe, do you mind if I watch one of your workouts? And he was incredibly humble and he was incredibly gracious. And he said, sure, man, I'm going tomorrow at 4. And I quickly got confused because I had just got done looking at the camp schedule, and the camp schedule said the very first workout with the kids was the next day at 3:30. And Kobe recognized that confused look on my face, and he clarified that by saying, yeah, that's 4 a.m. Well, as the high performers and high achievers that listen to your show can appreciate, there's not an excuse in the world on why you can't be somewhere at 4 a.m. I mean, not at least, not one that Kobe Bryant's going to accept. So I basically committed myself to being there. And, I figured as a young trainer, if I was going to be there anyway, I may as well try and impress Kobe. I might as well try and leave my mark and show him how serious I was.
Good lad. No ego in that.
I mean, no, none, huh?
No ego at all in that. I'm going to show Kobe Bryant.
I'm going to show him how serious I am. That's literally where my brain was at the time, which is kind of comical looking back. And so I set my alarm for 3 a.m. You know, I figured I'll get up at 3. I'll quickly get dressed. I'll head to the gym, and he'll find me waiting there when he arrives, and he'll be really impressed. Well, I jump up. I do get myself together. I hop in a cab. By the time I get to the gym, it's right around 3:30 in the morning. So, of course, it's pitch black outside.
Of course.
And at the moment I step out of the cab, I can see that the gym light's already on. And from the parking lot, I can even hear a ball bouncing and sneakers squeaking. I walk in the side door to the gym. Kobe's already in a full sweat. He was going through a warm-up before his scheduled workout with his trainer started at 4. And to just out of professional courtesy, I didn't want to bother him at all, so I just sat down to watch. And, you know, for the first 45 minutes, I was actually shocked. For the first 45 minutes, I watched the best player in the world do the most basic footwork and offensive moves. Kobe was doing stuff that I had routinely taught to middle school age players. Now, of course, this is Kobe Bryant. This is the Black Mamba. So he was doing everything at an unparalleled level of intensity. And he was doing everything with surgical precision. But the actual stuff he was doing was very basic. Now, his whole workout lasted a few hours. Oh, it was so basic.
Can I just take a pause there? Because I want everybody to get that. Because here's the guy who's the best in the world doing the basics over and over again at the highest possible level. But he's not going, well, I can skip. Even so, what I'm trying to get everybody to grasp here is what Alan said earlier, which is you've got to do the basics. But I think that we even go, it happens to me. I think, well, I can skip those basics because I've been doing this for 30 odd years. So I can skip those basics. And you know what? I can. The truth is I can. And then I fall on my ass. And then, you know, I can even get away with it occasionally. And then I fall on my ass. And it's like, what's the freaking basic stuff? Go back to the basics. So this was such an important point for everybody to get. Here's the guy who's the best in the world at what he does, doing the basics at 3:30 in the morning. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to nail that for people.
Well, and you're gonna love his response, because the workout lasted a couple hours, and you know, when it was over again, I didn't say anything to him, but my curiosity was getting the best of me. I mean, it still didn't quite sink in. So later that day at camp, I went up to him and I asked him point blank. I said, Kobe, I don't get it, man. You're the best player in the world. Why are you doing such basic drills? And once again, he smiled and was very gracious, but he said with all seriousness, why do you think I'm the best player in the world? Because I never get bored with the basics. And, you know, that happened over a decade ago. I have told that story no shortage of 1,000 times, and the hairs on my neck still stand up every time I say that, because it gives me a very visceral response to how I felt in that moment. And that was, the best player in the world just told me that he never gets bored with doing the basics, and that his commitment to excellence in what many consider mundane and monotonous is the reason that he's so successful. And that was a life-changing lesson for me at that time as a young coach, because it hammered home the fact that if the best player in the world is not above doing the basics, then certainly I'm not. And I need to establish what the basics are in my life, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in business, whether it's in leadership. I need to establish what those basics are, and I need to make a firm commitment to practice them every single day, and not just go through the motions, which is what most people do, but actually practice them with the intensity and focus that they deserve. And I found, just like you alluded to there, of course, I'm human and I'm fallible. There are times where I deviate from that. And anytime I find that I'm not getting the result that I believe I'm capable of, when I'm not performing at the level I believe I'm capable of, anytime I work back and I start to look at my routines and my habits, I find that I've usually veered away from the basics, and I've got to tighten the screws and refocus the lens and get back to them. That is almost always the cause of lower performance. It's trying to skip steps. It's trying to chase what's flashy, and it's not sticking to the basics because they work.
Yeah, you know, and we got a lot more to talk about here, but the bottom line is we could actually end the show right here and say, that's the lesson right there. You want to raise your game in business? go home, go to the office, shut the door, do whatever you need to do, and go, what are the basics that we need to do? Not the things that we do that quote work, but what is the basics that we need to do, and how can we do them better and practice them over and over till they are second nature, and then go, okay, how can we polish the basics? Because I just love that story that he was doing the basics.
Well, here's what it's
so much higher level, but doing them.
Here's what I had to really internalize and struggled with, and I'm hoping this helps your listeners as well. A lot of people treat the word basic and easy as if they're synonyms, and they're not. They're not. Yes. They're not the same thing.
Very good point.
Something is basic, it doesn't mean that it's easy. Because if it was easy, everyone else would already be doing it, but it's not. So going in at 3:30 in the morning to do basic footwork and offensive moves is basic by definition. But obviously it's not easy, because there's only a very small percentage of basketball players that are willing to do that, and willing to do that to the degree of intensity and focus and execution that he was. So it's so important for folks. And I think that's usually why many people look at the basics and they kind of scoff them off, or they roll their eyes, because they're thinking, oh, that stuff, yeah, that's not going to help. But that's the foundation to which the rest of the house is built. And, I always laugh, in the NFL, this happens every single year. It happened about 6 months ago during a press conference. When an NFL team loses 2 or 3 games in a row, inevitably the head coach comes on during the post-game press conference and says something to the effect of, on Monday, we're going to get back to the basics. Which in football is, blocking and tackling. And I always laugh because, first of all, NFL head coaches are brilliant leaders. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm a better leader than those guys by any means, but it always makes me laugh that their answer to the problem is to get back to the basics, which of course leads the obvious question: why did you leave them in the first place? Why did you leave them,
right? Yeah.
If you think that's going to solve your problem, then why did you leave them? And the best coaches that I've ever been around, they do the basics, or in sport, it would be the fundamentals, for a portion of every single practice or every single workout. And as leaders in business, it's the same thing. If you're meeting with your sales team, decide with your sales team what the basic foundational components are to being good at sales, and making sure that that stuff's getting done every day, that's the stuff that you're practicing. That's the stuff that you're emphasizing. That's the stuff that you're praising. And then you'll help reduce the temptation to skip it.
So is that what we need to do, Alan, with our, as we lead, is to actually ask, what are the basics?
Yes, we have to ask it internally, and we have to ask it to get the perspective of those that we lead. A perfect example, I'm a big believer that active listening is one of the foundational fundamentals of being a good leader. I believe that's one of the reasons that you're so effective at what you do, is because you take time to listen, not just in person during a conversation, but one of the things that really drew me to you originally was how well you listened on social media. That was how we originally got connected. I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, I had tweeted something about you, and within minutes you had replied back because you listened to the tweet. And I was blown away by that. And that's, so active listening, in my opinion, is like the footwork of leadership. Footwork is to basketball as listening is to leadership. So then as a leader, you have to ask yourself, are you practicing the skill of active listening? Are you doing what's required to become the best listener you can be? And if the answer is no, then I believe that you're skipping the basics in trying to be a more effective leader. And, I bring this one up because it's one that I've had to constantly revisit for myself and look in the mirror and say, Alan, are you the best listener that you're capable of? It's funny that as a professional speaker, I get paid to talk, but the real value in my ability to do that is in the listening. When I have a pre-event call, or I meet with a client ahead of time, they do 90% of the talking, and all I'm doing is asking question after question to make sure that I get the right information so that I can then customize my talk to be right on point for them. And it's vital that as leaders, we're willing to listen. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up because I'm not doing a good job listening, is listening not only helps you prepare, but listening is the glue to leadership, because listening shows someone that you care about them. And caring is the glue that will forge any connection or relationship. For those that you lead, They have to know that you care about them. And one of the best ways we can show people we care is by listening to them and giving them our attention in the present moment. Because I firmly believe that's the number one gift we have to give another human being is our attention.
Absolutely. And, you know, you brought up a lot of great things there that we can unpack. And first of all is, you know, you call active listening, I call curiosity, you know,
Yes.
and this is just this willingness to be curious. And what that means, you know, when people ask me, well, how do you do that in a conversation? And the answer is stop listening with intent to reply. Start listening with intent to hear. Because you will hear the nuances of what's being said. You'll hear the tonality. You'll hear the cadence of what's being said, because something can be said with exactly the same words in different cadence or with different tonality. You know, I love you is very different than I love you.
Yes.
Right. They're the same words, but it's a grossly different meaning. Right. So it's listening with intent to really hear people. That curiosity is vital, vital, vital. And there's another piece that I wanted to unpack there, which is I've talked a lot about this, and I think it's important for us as leaders to grasp this, because I think that we can often make, I think one of the most destructive things we can do as leaders is shame people. And shame is, I think it's an epidemic. Yeah, we shame people all the time, and in fairness, I know that I've done it myself, and I've never meant to shame people, but I've shamed them. And we have to be very, very, very aware of ourselves not shaming people, because nobody gets better through shame. Nobody gets better through shame. And part of that is this willingness to not only listen, but to, when we speak, to remove what I call assumptive knowledge. So when you used a term which is basic, and a very good friend of mine, I was helping him to build his online business. And I said, I want you to do me a video. And he's like, okay. And he's, you know, fought me on it. Yeah, okay, but never did it. Okay, yeah, never did it. So after about 2 months, I said, just make the freaking video, put it on your phone. We're not going to show it anybody. I'm going to see it. He goes, it's going to be crap. I go, it's okay. Just do it. So he does it. And he starts showing it to me. And I'm 4 minutes into this 6-minute video. And I go, stop it. And he goes, why? He goes, it's crap, isn't it? I go, yeah. And he goes, oh, see, I said it was. I said, it's not crap because of the reasons you think. You think it's crap because it's on a phone. I don't care about that. And he goes, yeah, but it's also crappy information. I go, that's what the crap is. And he goes, what? And he goes, I said, not that it's crappy information, that you've run it on assumptive knowledge. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you've made the video for somebody who is already elite. And that's not who you're aiming at. So you assume everybody who's watching it has got steps 1 through 9, and you're offering them you're offering step 10. Yeah. Is that who this video is made for? And he goes, no. I said, who is made for? He goes, for somebody who's at level 2. I said, then give them level 2. This is your ego trying not to look stupid. Right. And you're afraid of that. And as leaders, we often do that. We look at somebody and go, don't you know that?
Right.
Don't you know that? And so we're not listening anymore. We're assuming, as opposed to stopping and going, hold on a second. Tell me what you know about this. And if you don't know, I'm giving you full permission to say, I don't know, because I want to support you, coach you, give you the team who can help you. That's getting your own ego out of the way, letting their ego move to the side, being curious with the active listening, and being in this place of saying, I want to support you with what you see as the basics, because what I see as the basics, what's basic for me in speaking is not basic for somebody starting out.
Yes.
And I think that this is why I love what you're saying here about going to the basics. Like, you've got to find out, and like you said, working with your team, you've got to look and say, well, here's what's basic for me, but that's not basic for you. What's basic for you? In fact, I should shut up with what's basic for me. Tell me what's basic for you first. So I love that you brought that together for people, that they can grasp that it's not your basic imposed on someone else's. It's everybody's basic. What is basic for you?
Absolutely. And as you just teed up perfectly right there, you'll only get that by asking, having a sense of curiosity, and then listening. And I love that point about not making assumptions, because when you do speak over someone's head and you make the assumption that they know that, then the inherent guilt and shame is going to fall on them, because they're going to feel bad for not being able to keep up with what it is that you're saying. And you're 100% right. And that really leads into that when we talk about communication, that everything we do sends an unconscious message. I mean, there's the words that we say, and then there's an underlying message underneath that. And you just gave a perfect example. Another one that I see all the time with leaders is when they micromanage. So you're on my team, Dov. I give you an important project, and then I either literally or figuratively stand over your shoulder and breathe down your neck while you do it. Well, the problem with that is I'm sending an unconscious message that I don't trust you, that
Absolutely.
I don't believe in you, that I think you're too big of a bonehead to do this right, and I have to stand over you. And that, again, is going to send a toxic, shameful type of emotion. That's going to erode any type of connection that you and I have created. And as you mentioned earlier, that's not my intent. My intent is to make sure that this gets done correctly. However, if I'm not careful with my unconscious message, I'm going to end up shaming you and making you feel bad that you can't do this without me standing there. And it's going to put a dysfunction in our relationship. And, one of the earliest things I learned as a young coach was very helpful. And that is, a good leader is always going to be demanding, but is never going to be demeaning. And whether your demeaning is intentional or unintentional is irrelevant. It's all about how they receive it. So we have to make sure that everything we do, spoken and unspoken, communicate something that is in no way demeaning, which would then cause shame, or which would cause guilt, or would cause someone to feel insecure, inadequate. Because our job as leaders is to build everybody up and empower them. And the only way we can do that effectively is if we listen. And that's why I love the way that you said that it's not what my basics are, it's what are your basics. And the only way I can find that out is by asking and then listening, and then giving you the tools that I have to help you do your job to the best of your ability. And when we can get to that point as leaders, now we're starting to get somewhere.
The other challenge with this, Alan, and I know you're definitely on track with this, is that as leaders, the demands have gone up, not down. We're required to do more. There's a whole set of demands that are soft and hard at every possible level. And one of the things in this world of, oh, well, hold on a second, my phone just went off. Oh, hold on a second, this is beeping, that's beeping. It's very difficult for most people to become present. And I know that you and I agree fully around the need to be present. Talk to us about what you see there about being present, because I think that people don't actually even get that, what it means. I mean, they know the term, but again, there's a lot of assumptive knowledge around what that actually means. So talk to us about when you talk about being present as a leader, what do you mean by that?
Well, let me preface it by this, and I'll use myself as an example. Being in the present moment is without question the most powerful and significant thing I can do to pursue my own, and you can fill in the blank here, happiness, fulfillment, influence, impact, success, significance. The only way I'll ever be able to come close to achieving any of those things is if I'm in the present moment. Now, with that being said, as a 43-year-old father of three and a speaker and a business owner, being in the present moment is the biggest challenge I personally face. I mean, you want to talk about something that's basic, be where your feet are, be in the present moment. Very basic, but it is absolutely not easy. And I do think there's a scale. I mean, even a Tibetan monk is not present every second of every day for their entire life. They just happen to be more present more often than most people. So for me, it's the biggest challenge I face every single day is not allowing all of these distractions, many of them are digital and can be found on the phone, to rob me of being in the present moment. And to be where your feet are is the short trigger and definition that I use all the time. And when I say that, I simply mean that I need my head and my heart to be wherever my feet are. I mean, think about this. How many times have you been with someone, but you haven't really been with someone? You've been focused on something else. You might be with them in body, but you're not with them with mind and in spirit. And that's where there's a disconnect. And once again, we talk about unconscious messages. Now, I want to make sure people know I'm not anti-technology. I embrace technology, but I know for a fact that if you and I are out to lunch and you're constantly looking at your phone, you're sending an unconscious message to me that what's on your phone is more important than me. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
basic. Even my young children intuitively know that. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there may be times where what's on your phone is more important to me. So I'm not passing a judgment. I just want people to know that as a leader, if you're constantly sending a message to those that you lead, that something is more important than they are, once again, you're going to erode the connection you have with them. And that can be a problem. That's like, tugging on the yarn of a sweater. Whole thing's going to come apart if you're not investing your time in the present moment to those that you lead. And, as basketball players, we would teach them how to play present, to be in the present moment. And to do that, there's a few things they need to do. One, they have to stop thinking about the play that just happened, because that one's over. If a basketball player misses a shot or turns the ball over, or the ref misses a call, the more time they spend disappointed or whining and crying or belly aching about that play, they're robbing themselves of being in the present moment. They're going to have a negative effect on the next play because they're not in the present moment. And what I found that the way to be present is to put our focus into the two things that we have control over, which is our own effort and our own attitude, and do our best to disregard everything else. Effort is a choice. And most people will acknowledge that working hard is a choice, but you realize that if working hard is a choice, that means by default, not working hard is also a choice.
Of course.
Most people don't own that half of it. Most people, when you call them out or hold them accountable for not working hard, that's when they start to make excuses. I didn't get any sleep last night. I didn't eat breakfast. I was sick. Those things are very understandable, but they're not an excuse for not giving your best effort. And then the other thing that we have control over is our attitude. And, I've said this to my young kids a million times, you don't control what happens to you, but you control how you react to it or respond to it. And that's good. That's good medicine for leaders to take too, because we don't control the vast majority of things that happen to us, that happen to our business, but we always choose how we'll move forward from that. And high performers and high achievers always choose a way, regardless of if what happened was good or bad. They choose to take from that what will help them get better and improve. And when we can do those things, then we're in the present moment. And the first thing we need, though, is awareness. And that's the state that I'm in now. I'm certainly not present every moment of every day, but I'm pretty quick now to realize when I'm not present and snap myself back. So if you and I were having a conversation and for 10 seconds I zone off because I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner, I quickly can get myself back to present and back to being the attentive listener that you deserve. And I'm getting much better at getting back to the present moment now.
Yeah, this is one of the things I did a couple of videos recently on mindfulness, and people the not understanding of what mindfulness is, and it's simply about being present.
Yes.
But being present is about having an awareness of when I'm not present.
Yes.
It can't start anywhere but that. One of my great teachers, Bhattacharya, who said gave me the 3 questions that allowed me to understand what real mindfulness was. And he said, "What time is it?" And I went, "Well, it's 3:30. No, it's not. Okay, is my watch wrong?" And he goes, "No. My watch isn't wrong, and it's not 3:30. And he goes, "No." I said, "Okay, what time is it?" He goes, "It's now."
Oh, I love that.
He goes, "Where are you?" And I go, "Well, we're in UWA." He goes, "Nope." And I go, "Western Australia?" "Nope." "Southern Hemisphere?" "Nope." "Where are you?" I said, "I guess I don't know." He says, "You're here."
Yes.
"Or are you?"
Right.
And he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm talking to you." He goes, "Are you?" Right? And those 3 questions have run my life. They come from the Vedanta, from Vedanta philosophy. And, in my studies of Vedanta, that was my constant reminder, right? What time is it? Where are you? What are you doing? And the answer is being. Am I? No, I'm not being. I'm floating off somewhere else. Where am I? I'm not here. I'm in that meeting next week. What time is it? Well, it's 20 minutes from now, because I'm thinking about the thing that's 20 minutes from now. And that willingness, and that's what you're talking about. For me, that's a basic. right?
Oh,
It's
it's
that's
absolutely a
a
basic.
great example of a basic. Here's the basic. You can do all the other shit. Let's say you've got to do the foot moves or whatever it is, but you're not actually there psychologically. You're somewhere else. You're not
Right?
doing the basics.
Exactly.
Your feet are doing the basics, but you're not. And when you describe that Kobe Bryant thing, now everybody who knows me knows I know about as much about sports as I do about knitting. I know nothing, but I know the name Kobe Bryant, and I know the names, of these people. And when you described that to me, I saw that guy on an empty basketball court. I could hear his sneakers, and I could feel the sweat dripping off his body,
Yes.
doing these basic things. And the reason I think I got that so viscerally was because I got the sense that the guy was totally, absolutely, completely present doing it, not being an A star who has to go through the motions, which,
Right.
as you said, is vastly different. It's not going through the motions. It's actually, can you be freaking present? Can you be aware when your wife, your husband, your lover, your children, your aunt, uncle, best friend sits down with you? They want to know you're there. In my last book, Fiercely Loyal, I talked about, how the world has changed. And one of the ways that the world has changed is, and I said, picture yourself sitting in a restaurant and you look over at the booth over there and there's 4 people having dinner and they all have their heads down. And you think, oh my goodness, people are praying over dinner. No, they're all looking at their freaking phones, right? And I said, they're all on their phones and they're probably saying, this is boring. I wish I was with you, to the person on the other phone who's on their phone and not present with themselves. I mean, this is the basics. We've got to learn to come back and be present. And that, as you said, that's not possible without first having the awareness that I'm not present.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you just put a big bow tie on everything we've been talking about, that regardless of what it is, just being human beings, that the most basic component of all of that is being present, is being aware, and is being mindful. And how many people skip over that? And, it's like anything else. It takes conditioning. It takes practice. It takes repetition. We have to practice being present. We have to, and this is where, we need, I know for myself that if my phone is on my person, I'm probably going to check it. So for me, I know that when it's time to be present, like I am right now with you and your audience, I don't have my phone on me. So there's not even a chance that I can check it. I do the same thing when I'm with my children. If I'm going to take my children to the park, I choose to leave my phone in the car. And that's not to say parents that don't do that. I'm not saying I'm a better parent than you, and I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying that I have the awareness to know myself well enough to know that if I have my phone on me, the temptation to rob me of the present moment is so high that willpower is not something I want to wrestle with. So I come up with systems and processes to help eliminate that. And I take the very first thing I do every single morning is I follow a 10-minute guided meditation using the Headspace app. And today was my 629th consecutive day using that app because it keeps track. And I found that just that little 10-minute routine helps me start my day in a much more grounded and aware way. And yeah, it's still up and down. There's some mornings where I'm present for the full 10 minutes. And there's other mornings I'm like a squirrel. I'm all over the place. But it's the routine of practicing the awareness that helps build it like a muscle. And now, as I mentioned, I'm at a point where if I'm out with you, if I'm out to lunch with you and I'm not present for a few seconds, I can get back there very, very quickly. So it's not about being perfect. It's about working for progress. And I'm very proud to say that, generally speaking, I am more present today than I was a year ago. And if you and I reconnect a year from today, I can all but guarantee you I'll be even more present then, because it's one of the basics that I've committed to working on every single day.
Isn't it interesting? We've been in this conversation for more than half the show, almost 3/4 of the show. And really, your book is called Raise Your Game. It's about becoming better at everything we do. And in honesty, it's about basics.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's about basics. It's not this new whiz-bang technology, right? It's about, do you want to be better at the game of your own life? Not only a business of leadership, but in your own life? let's find the basics.
Yeah.
I love that, Alan. I really do. And I think that, again, I myself might have said to somebody who said, well, this is about the basics. Whatever,
Right.
not really that interested. But it's not about the basics. It's about doing the basics. There's a
Yes.
great big difference between, well, this is about the basics. Who gives a shit?
Right.
I don't care. But about doing the basics, and it's the Karate Kid. Right?
Yes.
You wipe the windows, you paint the fence, you do the basics over and over, and suddenly you've got all these moves down and you didn't even know you were learning them. And that's what it is. I love that. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, my publisher gets irritated with me when I disparage my own subtitle, but the subtitle of the book is High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best. And I did a little eye roll there because I told them from day one, there are no secrets in this book. Every single thing in this book, I'm going to say, people already intuitively and intellectually know because they are the basics. But what I found, having worked with high performers for a long time now, is there's a difference between what we all know and what we all do. And that's called a performance gap. And it's the gap between what we know we're supposed to do and what we do. I promise you that everyone listening to this is already well aware of the basics that they should be doing. I don't think anyone listening to this is just now finding out how important it is to be in the present moment. People know this stuff, but as you know so well, just because you know doesn't mean that you do. And I laugh because when I was a child, I was always taught that knowledge is power. And as an adult, I've learned that that is actually incomplete, that knowledge itself is not powerful. It's the application of knowledge that is powerful, that you can know everything in the world, but if you don't do any of it, it'll have no effect on your life. So the key is making sure, folks, once you know what these basics are, now, as you just said so perfectly, now we have to do them. But we can't just do them just to check it off of our to-do list. We have to do them with focus. We have to do them with intention. We have to do them with effort. We have to do them with precision. So if you're going to do them, then you may as well do it to the best of your ability. If not, you're wasting your own time. Exactly. And time is the most precious resource that any of us have because we don't know when it's going to be over or when it's going to run out.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you brought up something that, you talked about when you were a kid, you believed that knowledge was power. You were taught that knowledge was power. But, in many ways, we are shaped and formed by our childhood, and the childhood we grow up in can break us. That same childhood, identical childhood, can give somebody else wings. It's, it's the same childhood and how we interpret that childhood, what we do with it. How do you feel your childhood shaped you, for better or worse? How did it shape you into becoming the kind of person that you are, not just as a leader, not just as an author, not just as a speaker or a trainer, but as a human being?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I had two loving parents. I came from a two-parent household, both of which were in elementary education. So both understood how important servant leadership was and to pour into others and fill their buckets. And, my parents always modeled very high character and high integrity, which, I'm incredibly appreciative of. So many of the seeds that were implanted in me certainly have worked to my benefit. But, I'll share one, and I have not shared this publicly very often. And by no means am I sharing this to diminish my parents. My parents are still alive and married to this day, and I love them more than anything. But because they were both elementary educators, and I hope you find this fascinating, so we had very modest income. My parents didn't make a lot of money, and they would say things to the extent, and I know they had noble intention of, well, we don't have a lot of money, but we're good people. We have good hearts. We serve. And I do believe that is true. But what I didn't realize until I was an adult, that I had a very bad relationship with money, because when my parents planted that seed, what I took from it unconsciously was, well, that means people that do have money aren't good people, aren't high character. And I know that was not what they meant, but that was the way that I received it as a kid, where we don't have money, but at least we're these things. And as I got older, I believe that caused a very unhealthy relationship in my life with money, one that I've been working to overcome over the last few years, because now I know plenty of people like yourself that make extraordinary money and are some of the best human beings on the planet, people that use their money for good, to do a lot of good in this world, that there is no relationship between money and character. There are poor people that are great, and there are poor people that are a-holes. There are rich people that are great, and there are rich people that are a-holes. Those things they're not cause and effect. But the reason I say that is, for better or worse, I had a seed that was planted in me that gave me an unhealthy relationship with money. And, I'm on a much better track now. I've never had a problem in my life with making money, but I've never made consistently great decisions on what to do with that money. And that's, as of a few years ago, I've really started to improve. But the reason I bring that up is, now as an adult, I've been going back and uncovering and unturning over every rock from my childhood and trying to take everything that I was taught. And I'm asking myself now, is this something that I should believe now? Or did I just believe it because an adult told it to me when I was really small? And now that I'm older and I can go back and look at all of these things, I can look back with a critical eye and say, yeah, these seeds were planted in me as a child, and there's still things that I believe, but there's a whole host of things that I was taught as a child, like knowledge is power, that I no longer believe. And it's very liberating to make my own decisions now on what it is that I believe. And, with my own children, I'm trying to be very careful about the seeds I plant in them. And most importantly, what I teach for them and model is that I want them to be free thinkers, that I'm happy to share with them my perspective on anything, but I don't want them to think that I believe what I do is right or is better. I want each of them to take anything and be able to do free thinking and make decisions on their own. And I think as a parent, one of the best tools I can give my kids is the ability to make decisions on their own. And even as young kids, I let them make a lot of decisions now because I want them to see the relationship between making decisions and what the consequences of those decisions are. And I don't want to rob them of that. So I know that's probably not where you wanted to take that question.
No, not at all.
As a childhood, that was where it came from.
Completely in context of what I was asking, because I think that this is so important for us as leaders, because one of the things, again, one of my videos that I did was leadership is parenting.
Yeah.
And as a parent, you are a leader to your children, but as a leader of the people you lead, you are a parent, and you are dictating what is right and wrong, and you need to question that in yourself. In one of my books called Don't Read This Unless You Want More Money, the back of the book says everything you learn about money, you likely learned from people who didn't have it.
Amen. 100%.
And your mom and dad didn't do it because they were assholes, and they weren't trying to be assholes. They were actually being decent human beings, but the mind works in polarity. This is what people don't understand. The mind works in polarity. So if the mind gets a message, we may not have a lot of money, but at least we're good, caring, loving people, then the polarity of that is, well, people with money are douchebags. Oh, okay, good. So I don't want to be a douchebag, so I'll just want to have any money.
So I'll unconsciously ruin my financial future.
I can never have any money, but that way I'll never be a douchebag, and I'll always be a good, caring person who's scrambling for rent and covered in anxiety at the end of the month every month. Yeah, so absolutely.
Well said. And it's the difference, and I know it's stuff that's talked about by a lot of other people, but it's that scarcity versus abundance mindset. And unintentionally, I grew up with a scarcity mindset, that there was never enough, and that you had to really hide your acorns in order to be prepared. And now I'm trying to unwire that for myself so that I live a life of abundance. But to really break the cycle, I'm trying to implant that with my children and make sure that they're taught and that I model for them a life of abundance. And please know too, that I'm not just talking about, zeros in the bank account, that a life of abundance has to go far, far more than just monetary or financial. It's in everything that we do, whether it's relationships or so forth. So it's,
but again, we're coming to this point, which is, so whatever it is, whether it's practicing on the basketball court, whether it's leading your team, whether it's parenting, or whether it's your relationship with money, what are the basics for you? Because the basics for Alan or me, like I grew up in abject poverty, you grew up in a poor family, or not so well off financially family, is going to be different than if you're born into massive amounts of wealth.
Absolutely.
The basics are going to be different. And that's what I'm saying about learning the basics. So we're back at that same fundamental piece here, is just what is the basics for you, and get over your own shame around saying, I don't like to ask this question, but What is a 401k? I've never heard of that. I know what,
Right.
I've heard people say it, but I don't know what it is. You know why? Because I'm not American. I don't know what it is. And I
Right.
don't need to know what it is. But if I lived in the US, maybe that's the basic. And somebody else is going, oh my God, that's so basic. You know, there's a story, most people have never heard it. Tony Robbins used to tell 30 years ago. And he talked about when he first became successful and he was mentoring and leading a lot of very highly successful people who were making a lot more money than him. And he invited them to a private retreat in New York, and they came, and he asked them for help with his finances because he didn't understand money.
Yep.
And he said some of them were really pissed off at him because he'd asked, because they assumed he had a lot of money. And he said that it was really fascinating for him to understand how this assumption was about who he should be. But he had to climb over his own shame and say, I don't know. Here I am, this highly successful guy who's now worked with Princess Diana, whoever it was at the time, and I don't know. And that putting your ego to the side, because you may have a big persona and brilliance in a certain area, that doesn't mean you don't have less brilliance in other areas. And the courage to say, you know what, I may be super smart at this, but I'm dumb as shit at this. Can you help me with this? Because I don't know. Because here's the thing, you will remain less than brilliant in anything you don't bring forward and say, okay, I need to learn. And that's the courage to be curious, the courage to ask for help. We're getting close to the end of the show, and I want to ask you this.
I just want to say one point on that, because I love the way that you just teed that up. I think one of the things that brings shame on a lot of people is this feeling of isolation and that we're alone. That, wow, I'm the only person in the room that doesn't know what a 401k is. I don't want to ask. When that's not the case. You know, someone said to me a long time ago, Alan, you're very unique, but your problems aren't. Like, I guarantee you that whatever problem you're having, someone else in the world is having that same problem. And you take some comfort in that. So whereas I might be afraid to ask you about what a 401k is, I can promise you someone else around me doesn't know what it is either. So I think when we can put our ego aside, the way you just said with Tony, and just cut through that and be very direct, it's an incredibly liberating feeling on the other side.
It absolutely is. And it kind of tees me into this question that I want to ask you, which is, you've touched on a lot of this throughout, and I believe that leaders, particularly conscious leaders, are all committed to their growth. As successful as you are, and I mean you personally, Alan, and as you're speaking all over the world, you're highly esteemed in what it is you do. What is something that you are personally working on within yourself right now, so that people can grasp that there is no there, and that we've got to keep working on? So what is something you're working on in you?
Well, you know, what's funny is I've already teed up two of them. One of them is my ability to be present, and I've been working on that for years, but I'm not giving up on it. It's still something I have to be conscious of every day. But the second, which is a little bit more newer found, is my relationship with money, and is in my relationship with an abundance mindset. And like anything, I have a coach. He's a financial advisor and a wealth manager, and he's somebody, I had a call with him earlier today. He's someone that helps hold me accountable, helps me put a blueprint in place, helps me continue to work on the basics of what I'm doing with the money that I do earn, so that I can start to rewire myself and have a much better relationship with money, so that I can provide better for my family. I can do better in my community. I can use money as a tool to help others. But most importantly, I can model this relationship with money with my children. So those are two things that I'm very conscious of. I'm also very proud to say that I've made improvements in both areas, and will continue to do so. Like a lot of people, I find improvement to be highly motivational. So the fact that I've started to see some momentum, and my financial situation is much better today than it was 3 or 4 years ago, that motivates me to continue to stick with those basics. The fact that I'm more present today than I was 3 or 4 years ago motivates me even more. So those are two things that I'm working on internally, and am certainly proud to have the vulnerability to share that with others, because as you just said, where the financial situation is not a strength of mine yet, I have some other areas that are strengths. And someone listening to this right now, their financial world might be pristine. They've known this. They've had this relationship with money forever, but maybe they have an area of their life. So that's why I guess to kind of sum up our entire conversation is I quit playing the comparison game years ago because it'll never work. You know, if I compare myself to you in a variety of different areas, I'm going to probably feel pretty bad about myself. And that's not fair to do that. So that's one of the dangers of social media is we get pulled into playing the comparison game. And
absolutely.
You know, right now, I no longer play it. I'm running my race. I'm doing my thing, and I'm doing it to the best of my ability. I'm going to continue to learn as I go and continue to tweak and refine and never be complacent, but I'm going to stick with the basics. And I tell you what, man, I've never been happier with that mindset.
That's awesome. Tell us something that brings you joy.
Spending quality time with my children, without question. So I have 9-year-old twin sons and a 7-year-old daughter. And yeah, when I get to spend some quality time with them, it definitely puts a smile on my face.
That's beautiful. What's a guilty pleasure for Alan Stein Jr.?
You know, I watch a ton of Netflix, and I don't watch mindless stuff. I actually, I enjoy documentaries. I enjoy stand-up comedy, and I enjoy really well-written and well-executed series and movies. And I really study that because I have such a respect for writers and cinematographers and videographers and actors. But people probably wouldn't think, given I have a very active lifestyle and that I'm very busy, that I actually do watch a fair amount of Netflix.
What's one that you would pull out as like, yeah, people would never guess that I'm really into that?
Oh boy. I mean, I would say it probably is the Netflix genre in general, because I'm such an active guy and I promote health and wellness and fitness and an active lifestyle. So I think most people are very surprised that they can find me sitting on my couch devouring Netflix. And one other thing that people are incredibly surprised by, and maybe even your listeners will be at the end of this, I actually am heavily introverted. You know, I love being in front of people, but it drains me of my energy. And I say this with all due respect. When this podcast is over, I can't wait to shut it down for a little bit and recharge my own battery, because I'll be emotionally exhausted just from our wonderful conversation. And that's because as an introvert, I need solitude and alone time to recharge my battery. You know, when I get off stage and I'm done speaking to a couple thousand people, I can't wait to get back to my hotel room and be in sheer silence so that I can recharge. But people think that since I'm rather outgoing and that I'm a speaker, they naturally assume I'm an extrovert, and I'm not. I'm very, very introverted.
Yeah, I'm an extroverted introvert.
Ah, nice.
Right. So I've learned how to be an extrovert. I've learned that it's a skill, and I know when to do it and how to do it, but I can also sit quietly. But I'm naturally introverted. I'm naturally shy. I have a very good friend of mine who's like, "You shy, really?" My wife still thinks it's funny, right? After 20 odd years, she's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Right. Honestly, I'm still shy. I still have social anxiety. I go to an event, I'm like, okay, I got to speak to people because it's not natural to me. And everybody thinks it's so natural, but because we're speakers and performers and, you know, we have to present, and no, it's still not, it's not natural. It's so, so as we finish here, Alan, I want to ask you I like to ask my guests this: if you could give one piece of practical advice, one thing that our listener can go away and do within the next 24 hours, what would you suggest that they do that's practical?
As leaders, it's important that we fill our own bucket first before we try to pour into others. You know, I think that might even be a Tony Robbins-ism or a Zig Ziglar, you know, that you can't pour anything out of an empty cup, which means if you don't fill your cup first, you can't pour into others. So an exercise I love to do with leaders is make a list of the 4 or 5 things that refill your own bucket. They recharge you mentally, physically, and emotionally. And I say things, you know, this could be taking a yoga class. It could be listening to classical music. It could be going for a long walk with your dog, whatever it is. But what things that when you do them, they recharge you, and make that list. And then I want you to make a list of what a typical day in your life looks like. You know, what's your morning routine? What do you do during the typical work day? What's your evening routine? And you don't have to account for every second, but just generally speaking. And then what I want you to do is compare those 2 sets of notes. And I want to see are you making an effort on a daily basis to make time, not to find time, to make time to do the things that you know recharge your battery and refill your bucket? And if the answer to that is no, then you're not performing at the level that you're capable of. You're not able to serve and impact and lead others to your maximum ability because you're not recharging yourself. And that I would highly encourage you to make time, even if it's only 15 minutes a day, to start to implement those things that you know refill your own bucket. And this will close that gap between knowing and doing. And when folks can actually take time each day to serve themselves, what I call me time, they'll see their performance increase, but they'll also see their ability to impact others will go through the roof.
Yeah, that is great practical advice. Couldn't agree more. Alan, this has been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you, sir, so much. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. Please tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find out more about you and all your wonderful resources.
Sure. Well, if anyone is interested in the book that we've talked about, they can go to raiseyourgamebook.com. If anyone's interested in anything else I've got going on, keynote speaking or workshops or trainings, they can just go to alansteinjr.com. And I'm at Alan Stein Jr. on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter. And I love, like you, I love engaging with folks on social. So if anyone was listening to this and you'd like to connect, just drop me a line on either one of those sites or on social, and I'd love to continue our conversation.
Fabulous. Thank you. And of course, we will post all of those links on the site so you'll be able to track them down and get a hold of Alan. I encourage you to get the book. It's a great book. Read it. And, as I say to you all the time, listen, information is worth the hole in a donut. Transformation comes from application of the information. Nothing changes unless you do. You got to apply it. So get the book, read it, do the exercises, go through it. I promise you'll get tons out of it. And I encourage you to listen back and take some notes and think about what it is you can do. And if you want to hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this show or any past episodes, you can go to our Facebook page. Just look for Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. And now you can chat about this show or any past shows. If you want to find out about how you can hire me, Dov Barron, as a speaker or a strategist for your organization, you can reach out to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. Be aware, though, that the research consistently shows that even the fastest growing companies face the same challenges, that they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing top talent, only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in the training and development of your talent, only to have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. Also, remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need any triple W's, just matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool, and it will allow you to see your 5 areas of leadership and where your real strengths are, and maybe where you need to tweak a little bit. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can seriously raise your game by being fully present and doing the basics. I'm Dov Barron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.